Thank you. And thank you all for rushing along the road, if you have just done that, as I did too, to come to this conversation. And at least one of our composers has just rushed down the hill from a rehearsal. So it's like that in festivals, isn't it? You spend a lot of time getting from one thing to the next, but it's lovely to see you all this afternoon. And I should acknowledge that it's Waitangi Day. In fact, I should have said tēnā koe to you all at the beginning of this talk, but anyway, here we are. So I'd like to invite to the stage the two composers we're going to talk to. That's Gareth Farr and Natalie Hunt.
Hello, my dear.
Hello.
Hi.
Gareth and I are very old friends. In fact, I've known
Not that
him.
old.
I'm going to reveal your secrets in a minute. But anyway, of age, I mean. In fact, I've known Gareth since the 1980s. He was a composition student then at Victoria University, and we have got a bit of a running joke going between us, because a few years later, I was working at what was then called the QE2 Arts Council, and Gareth was a grant applicant and came and sat on the floor of my office for some reason. I don't know why you sat on the floor, but anyway, to talk about funding. And he began then, and ever since has called me Queen Elizabeth.
No, I called, and I got terribly confused, and it was Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth Kerr, please. And I thought, actually, that kind of works. So, so we've just left it like that.
That's right, and actually my reply to this, which is our private joke really is, I've always sometimes said, well, which one of us is the Queen really, Gareth? Because as well as a hugely talented percussionist and composer, Gareth has a little bit of notoriety in the classical music world because he has an alter ego who's the magnificent and flamboyant percussion-playing drag queen, Lilith Lacroix. And we may or may not talk about that today. But Gareth was born, he probably won't mind me telling you when, in 1968 in Wellington, which means that next year he's turning 50. And this seems really improbable to me, that Gareth, who is so perennially young and energetic and fast-moving, he studied composition and percussion in Auckland and at Victoria University. He played in the Gamelan Orchestra at the latter, and he then moved to Rochester, New York, for postgrad studies at the Eastman School of Music. And then he came back to New Zealand, and as many of you know, his reputation developed rapidly. And his music was often, in those days, and still to some extent, powerful and rhythmic and percussion-based, and this was hugely appealing to audiences, and he got a steady stream of commissions, and he's really built a thriving freelance career, which is no mean feat for any composer. He's also a very versatile composer, and he writes for theatre, including comedy musicals, and film, and television, and ballet, and dance, and he also writes chamber vocal and orchestral music. And his reputation is now international. His music's been played at the Sydney and Beijing Olympics, the former by percussionist Evelyn Glennie with the NZSO, and it's been played at Gallipoli and lots of other places.
Sounds really good when you say it all at once.
That's right.
I've forgotten half of that.
Well, there you go. That's my job. So that student composer I remember from the 1980s wasn't quite naughty enough to be an enfant terrible, and he was endlessly generous to his student colleagues. He played their works and composed for their productions. If anyone said to Gareth, will you play in my piece, or will you write me a piece for something, he always said yes, or almost always said yes, which I think was a wonderful thing. And I think he's probably still doing a bit of that. Now he's got some respectability. He's an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit, he's an Arts Laureate of the Arts Foundation, and he's a distinguished alumnus of Auckland University. That all sounds quite good too, doesn't it?
It does.
And so we're going to talk today about his new string octet that will be premiered tonight. Not a percussion instrument in sight. So when I said this to Gareth, he said, that's what you think.
That's right.
And we may have time to touch on a couple of other world premieres that he's going to be involved in, well, that he has created for this year. And I hope he'll tell us a bit about how he reconciles the composer Gareth and the performer Gareth two quite different personalities, perhaps. My other guest for this conversation is another instrumentalist come composer, Natalie Hunt. Natalie, I'm allowed to tell ages, aren't I? Natalie, you're all so much younger than me, it doesn't matter. Natalie turns 32 this year, and she's a graduate of Victoria University and the New Zealand School of Music. And as well as composing, she's a clarinetist and a saxophonist and has an interest in jazz, plus theatre and musical theatre. She's had success in both the orchestral and chamber music worlds. In 2009, she was named NZSO National Youth Orchestra Composer in Residence, and she won the NZSO Todd Corporation Young Composer Award the same year. And last year, the New Zealand String Quartet toured two of her works, one of them with the intriguing title, Data Entry Groove.
Excellent.
That title hints that we might find some jazz, and also offers a clues to how she's been managing to make her living while composing. And I hope she'll tell us today about that, and also about the new work we're going to hear tonight, which is called simply Quartet, but which has a connection to recent events in New Zealand that affected most of us. So we'll start with you, Gareth. It seems as if you were destined to be a percussionist from a young age. You were dancing to rhythms as a small child. You tell me you danced to that wonderful rock work. Do you all remember O.C. Bisa? And then you played the piano for years. But there was a watershed moment when you were 16 when you encountered Don McGlashan. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I was just in the right place at the right time, and I'd always been a piano student. It had never occurred to me that drumming was even a job. But when I was little, I had a guitar which I used to whack like this with my hand because I just loved the way it resonated. Just the strings and the body resonating, not doing any, no actual notes. And I loved that because I turned it into a drum, I suppose. Apparently, I was very similar with the piano and still am from time to time. But when I was 16, my piano teacher was really starting to give up. She was just like, do you really want to do this? Because at that time, I wasn't getting much out of a Mozart sonata. I love them now. I mean, I wish I could sight read, but she was really thinking, there's something here, but I don't know what it is, and she was going a bit bonkers trying to get it out of me. And then, just then, Don McGlashan, who is, wonderful New Zealand rock musician in Mutton Birds and with his own solo career. At the time, this was 84, he was in a group called From Scratch, and they're a percussion group, and they were very, very inventive. Phil Dadson was the artistic leader at the time, and he was experimenting with what happens if you have a rhythm in 4, and then you have a rhythm at exactly the same time in 5. Of course, they're not going to add up. So they're going to start getting out of sync with each other, and then eventually, 4 times 5 beats later, they'll come back. But if you add then a rhythm in 6 at the same time, it creates this, it's almost like this rhythm that writes itself. And he was really, really interested in doing that sort of thing. And he was taking us, we would do things like clapping a rhythm in 4. So somebody would just go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3 at the same time, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. What was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4? And if you do all of those at the same time, it just sort of, unfolds before your very ears. And it was so fascinating to me as a 16-year-old. That just sort of was like, sorry, Mozart, see you later. And then he was doing more traditional snare drum technique work with me because I'd never drummed before, and he is a fabulous drummer and knew that would be something I could really run with.
Were you whacking any tubes with jandals as well? Because that was what From Scratch did, didn't they?
Yes, they have these fabulous instruments which are inspired by a Papua New Guinean instrument, and also lots of Indonesian instruments that are made of bamboo. But they use plumbing, they use PVC pipe, which sounds incredible, and they whack them with jandals, as Elizabeth says. No, we were really doing simple stuff, and it was so nice to be. It's nice for me to look back and see my 16-year-old self being so inspired by something really profoundly simple. Sitting in a room clapping, you know. I mean, it sort of doesn't sound very sophisticated, but wow,
Tapped into
it
something.
made my tyres squeal, that's for sure.
And you got, somehow, from there, you went to be a percussion student at university.
Well, he said just audition. I said, are you nuts? I've been doing this for 4 months. He said, they will see potential. And he was absolutely 100% right. Apparently my audition was abominable, in Wayne Laird's words, who was also a From Scratch member, but he said, we could tell that we'd be able to bring you up to scratch.
And they did. Yes. And you were living in Auckland at the time. You remember you mentioning something about you were living in Greyland with Pacific cultures around you too.
Well, that's right. It was just, the Tongan church was on the corner, so we had every weekend, I was just completely used to having Tongan hymns going through my head, and then just a couple of blocks down at Greyland Park, the Cook Island community would play cricket, kilikiti. And when someone scores a goal. I don't know how do you say cricket? I'm so
A run.
No, is it?
In
It's a
cricket?
wicket. See, we're both wrong.
A wicket. Oh, a wicket.
Sorry, I thought we were talking about hitting sixes or something.
No, so like when anyone sort of did something
Cricket, sport.
impressive sporting-wise, all of the drums would go off on the side. There'd be some guys that had the log drums on the side, and they'd be screaming and yelling, and I thought, okay, if that was every sports match, I could get that. I could totally get that.
Yeah, fabulous.
You know.
So there you were in Auckland, you were at university, and you became a composer during that time. How did you work out that you were a composer?
Again, it was one of those things that I just didn't know was a job. That I didn't know it was even a possibility, something on the horizon. And you have to do a certain amount of, just in your first year of musicianship courses, you're encouraged to do a little bit of something creative and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And John Rimmer, the composition teacher at Auckland University, just noticed that I really enjoyed that little module. And it was genius, actually. He made us all go into somewhere outdoors, maybe a park or something like that, and write a score of what you heard over, 10, 15 minutes. And it was such a good idea. It sort of made you sit outside and think, okay, so this is music, isn't it? I can hear a dog barking. Well, I'll just go ruff, 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 and make a little sound for that, a little symbol for that, and then we did some more instrumental stuff, and I just was so hooked. And again, I responded to him the same way I responded to Don. It's like, are you serious? I really haven't been doing this long. And he said, it doesn't matter. That's what you're here for. That's what I'm here for. To help you through it. And so I just immediately changed to double major percussion and composition, which really was the first time that I had really felt balanced as a musician, because they are two parts of me, but two quite different parts, I've always found.
Yes, interesting. So then, just to keep the story going here of your life, when I met you in 1989, I think it was, or 88, you'd come down to be a student at Victoria. What was the attraction?
Well, I met, there's this wonderful, wonderful composer who we lost a couple of years ago, Jack Boddy, and who has influenced almost every single part of the musical world of New Zealand, and in places, overseas as well. And I met him in 88 when I was in Hong Kong. I got a piece accepted into a young composers competition, so I got a lotto grant, I think. I've won $21 on lotto once, and I got probably, I don't know what it was, a couple of grand to go to Hong Kong. So that was the coup. And I met Jack Boddy, and he was saying, look, you've heard gamelan now, and you obviously like it. Would you like to sort of luring me down to Wellington?
in a Jack-like manner.
In a Jack-like manner, without when John Rimmer wasn't in the room. And it worked.
Yes, so Fantastic. And then you did some casual percussion work, I think, with the NZSO as well. Was that important?
Yes, it was hugely exciting. I mean, I basically I auditioned for the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra as a casual percussionist, so it meant I could kind of squeeze it in between lectures, which didn't really end up happening very well because they kind of overtook lectures, because one of the first pieces that I played in was The Rite of Spring. Oh.
I know,
And
envy.
it's just the most incredible thing. It's a terrifying piece to be in the middle of. I mean, it's quite a terrifying piece to be in the audience. But I was playing second timpani to the then principal timpanist, Gary Brain. And boy, is that jumping in at the deep end or what? I do remember there's this big bit that goes, second timpani, I think, first timpani and second timpani do some sort of interlocking thing, and it goes ba 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 ba, dun, da, 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 dun, da, 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 da. But I came in the complete, 2 pages out. So it was when the violas were doing this really sort of delicate little viola sextet, and I went ba 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 ba, and the entire orchestra just turned around and pissed themselves laughing at me.
This was in rehearsal.
This was in rehearsal, yes. But then in concert, Gary actually got lost, so it was a cursed week all over. But yeah,
Oh dear.
I was just like,
Yes, you don't realise what's happening half the time.
it swallowed me up moment, yeah.
And we'll bring Natalie in a moment, but I just want to talk a little bit about gamelan orchestra, because it became very important in your composing life, and you went to Indonesia and bought your own set of gamelan instruments. And yours were Balinese. You had been playing Javanese gamelan at Victoria. And can you tell us why you felt like a Colombian drug lord when you went to buy that?
Well, Indonesia is one of those countries that it has had terrible inflation, so their prices have a huge amount of zeros on them. And I think my gamelan was 86 million rupiah. And the largest note is 10,000 rupiah, so it was a stack about this high. And I went to just the regular tourist money changer, and they just sort of went, and I was like, oh, how am I going to get that? Because I'd already asked the gamelan maker, who was sort of in a sort of fairly village-like situation, do you take Visa? I mean, it was like, no. And he actually said, in Balinese, he said, no, pes saja, which just means just cash. Pes is cash. Yeah, there you go. So I had this huge stack of money, put it in I said, do you have a bag? So she just sort of found this old paper bag, and I have never got into a taxi so fast in my life. I was just like, right in there. But gamelan, the important thing for me is that it was just as I was discovering everything, and it just landed in my lap at the right time. Gamelan is, for those of you who don't know, it basically means orchestra in Indonesia. It's not an instrument, because people ask me if I play the gamelan. It's like, well, that's like asking me if I play the orchestra. It is the ensemble word, and it's an entirely percussion. Almost entirely percussion orchestra, and has hundreds of years of history in Java, and then in Bali as well. So yeah, and it was profound influence on my music. Yeah.
Yes, for many years.
Yes, I have to stop myself now. It's
Sounding like gamelan.
yeah. I've had enough years of doing that.
So we'll come back to some of your early successes, but let's bring Natalie into this conversation.
Okay.
Enough about me. What do you think about me?
That's right.
Would you like some water, Natalie?
That's right.
Sure.
So, Natalie,
Thank you.
you might like to just introduce yourself to the audience, first of all.
Yes, thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Natalie Takuinga, e noho tono ana ahau ki te whanganui atara. Ko Douglas Ilben, te rangatira, ko tangi te keo, te maunga, ko Ngāti Pākehā. Kia hau nei, na hau ana ngā waiata, whakawhetai atu kia koutou, nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Good. So I'm Pākehā, but on my tangite, and especially as classical composers, and we could probably have a basic conversation in Italian or French or German, I feel as though I should try and speak Te Reo as well, even though I still stumble through it. So apologies to anyone who speaks Tutor fluently. Sorry, but it's really lovely to be here. And thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And so, when did you realise that you were a composer?
Well, my mum's a music teacher, so I think she decided I was going to be musical. My brother too. We both got my children. Let me pass on my
Absolutely.
But she's a pianist, and in the piano books that I'd be learning as a child, it would say, Mozart wrote this piece when he was 6 years old. It's like, 6, eh?
It's intimidating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just annoying.
I'm sort of standing there trying to get, the perfect hand technique, balancing the eraser or the coin or whatever on the back of my hand, and Mozart by that stage is already writing little concertos. Like, okay, yeah, fine. But I also found that when I would be learning a piece on cello or on clarinet or piano, I'd get quite opinionated about how I thought it should go if I had written it, which is, I know, a terrible thing to say, but that's also when I realised that maybe I should be focusing on writing the music rather than practicing it. So
Yes, but you learned the clarinet.
I also learned clarinet, and I also learned cello. And then when I started to show an interest in jazz, I was given a saxophone, which was really nice of my parents. But Mum was a music teacher. Like in the summer holidays, she'd be able to bring home whatever instrument I'd taken a shine to, which is usually the double bass. And I'd be able to just try and play them at home. And
So that was wonderful practice for a would-be composer, because
Yes, it's
you were
lovely.
learning the capabilities of lots of instruments. Lots of composers don't have that opportunity.
yeah, and I still feel strange now if I'm writing a piece for an instrument that I have no physical understanding of. Like I want to, at very least, find the fingering chart online and just sort of, play the air fingering to see if it's going to work. Is it uncomfortable? Is it awkward for them to play? It doesn't feel fair to ask somebody to do something if I have no idea at all what I'm actually asking them to do, apart from hold your breath and play a whole lot of notes. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, so that's, that one of my questions was how do you compose when you don't play the instrument? But it sounds if you play everything, so that's
No.
not a problem.
Badly.
What's your favourite part of the composing process? Is it the writing, or is it the rehearsal moment, or is it listening to the performance, or?
It varies from piece to piece. I think probably that moment when, you've got writer's block or something and suddenly you find a breakthrough. Oh, thank God.
That one.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. I'm not going to have to give my money back and say, you know what, I really can't think of anything. No. Probably that be that, and also finishing it and just knowing that I've finally got a piece that I'm happy with, and it's okay to share it with the world now. Other people can see what I've been doing. I'm terrible perfectionist.
How do you manage with deadlines?
Actually, this one I missed.
This one you missed.
Yeah.
Yes.
So did I.
Thank you.
Well, there you are, you see. No role model here. No.
No, he actually was. Actually, I don't know if you... Oh, gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. When I was in servant form, I did my school's stage challenge that year, and I actually used Queen of Demons as one of the pieces that my group were going to dance to.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think I emailed you and said, hey, do you mind if I use your piece? And you replied, and I was like, oh my God, I've just got an email from Gareth Farr.
See how famous you are to the younger generation? Yes.
Sure, I've destroyed that now.
No.
I think one of the interesting things about, it's blank page syndrome, and basically high school level composers think they are the only people that get it, and it never leaves you. And the problem with, as you say, needing to be a perfectionist, otherwise, you can't just sort of say, oh, well, that'll do.
Yeah.
Nelson Festival, it'll do. It has to be perfect for the Nelson Festival.
Yeah.
But the thing there that you spend a lifetime realising is that no idea turns up perfectly formed. But they have huge potential, and ideas are arbitrary, and you have to let yourself be arbitrary, and not go, okay, that idea, I just thought of it, it's the first thing that popped into my head, it's probably no good because it's arbitrary. It's like, no, give it a little chance, nurture it. In a week and a half, you'll go, that was an awesome idea. I'm so glad I didn't chuck it in the bin. But it's so hard not to do that because it's a very long week and a half, just staring at a little idea that's going, I don't know what I am.
Yeah.
I don't know what piece you're writing.
And then you get the other voice that says, you know what, that idea, does that come from somebody else? Does somebody else already write that piece?
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
then like, so showing around your friends going, hey, so have you heard this tune before, please? Anyone? Have you? Okay, we're good? Okay, cool.
You really need to be able to put that on some sort of social media and say, look, I cannot possibly know every tune that's ever been written. Does anyone recognise this?
Yeah.
Does it matter really? Because
But it
I think
doesn't.
actually,
It
if you go
doesn't.
right back in history with composers, that I mean, Bach learned to be a composer by transcribing other people's music, and so that sort of sense of that it had to be absolutely original and yours and no one had ever written it before is quite a modern idea, I think, in a way that people drew on ideas from the past. Do you get nervous about performances?
Yes, I actually had bad dreams this week.
What did you dream?
There was one where I missed the plane to come here, and so I strapped plane wings onto me, and I was running down a hill, and using I don't know how this actually would have worked physically, but I had like a lever, and I was taking off into the sky to train. And then there was another one where I went for a walk to the beach and just totally missed being here at this. So yeah, today I got here, I caught the plane. I was about an hour early, but that's fine. I didn't do anything else today. After my rehearsal, I came here, I walked around the garden, was doing 3:23, 3:26, I come into the theatre. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, but you've been to a rehearsal of your piece.
Yes, and now
Today.
I feel much, much calmer.
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, I had to have another coffee and one of those energising juices just because I felt so calm. That I was, okay, now I need to stay
You're-
focused, stay awake. Yeah.
When you were working with the National Youth Orchestra, you wrote a work called Only to the Highest Mountain, which had a very unusual beginning. Why did that work begin so strangely? Well, tell us how it began first and then why.
Okay. It was written for the 5th anniversary of the National Youth Orchestra Composed in Residence and for the 50th, I think, anniversary of the Youth Orchestra itself. So it was quite a momentous occasion, and I also wanted to look at New Zealand's history. I mean, even though music, it's a piece of music, and ideally you should be able to listen to it without a novella telling you what to listen for, does this mean this, does this mean that, and telling you what do you think of it. You should just be able to listen to it as a piece of music. However, I do like writing pieces that are rather programmatic. And this particular one, I was looking at New Zealand's history. I'd been at the Party Haka Festival shortly before the deadline. I think a few months before that, or no, just over a year before that, some of our friends were arrested in Tūhoe, and I was thinking about what had combined to make New Zealand New Zealand. And I was thinking about colonisation and how in New Zealand's colonial history, the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, like before that, in 1835, we had the Declaration of Independence. There were French interests, there were other colonial interests in New Zealand, there were the missionaries concerned that the whalers are getting out of control and we really needed to bring some order. But then Hobson had a stroke as he was drafting up the treaty, and this whole colonisation, Treaty of Waitangi, actually happened very quickly. And we've got the conflicting versions of the treaty that happened as a result of that. So Only to the Highest Mountain, the way I originally wrote it in 2009, it begins out of the orchestra's tuning, with an offstage oboe imitating a karanga. And so the effect I wanted in the audience is that they're listening to this and they're listening to the orchestra finishing tuning, and they're sort of hearing this, the A going around the orchestra and all the other strings, and then there's this B flat karanga, and they're going, hang on, what's going on? Is this the piece? Has it started? Is it somebody just sort of forgot that the orchestra's walked on stage? But then of course there's the ambiguity because we forgot to tell Radio New Zealand that was what we were doing. Yeah.
So they didn't record that bit?
No, they didn't. My piece begins rather abruptly through the karanga, but the NZSO are kindly going to record it as part of the NZSO SOUNZ RNZ Concert readings in April this year. And I've said that it's okay with me if we just start it from the karanga and don't try and do that one again.
But your reason for starting out of an apparent, not quite chaos, but sort of something a little bit more amorphous, that was a metaphor for something.
It was a metaphor for colonisation and how it was suddenly happening.
Yes, that it
Yeah.
suddenly happened while all sorts of threads were
Yeah.
happening around.
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting.
Yes.
So that piece suggests that you might quite like to surprise an audience at times, and I wondered if that was right, and whether we might expect to find some surprises in the quartet tonight.
Oh, but another piece I wrote for the New Zealand String Quartet, Data Entry Groove. This is where my day job comes in.
She's talking about the piece Data Entry Groove that I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
Yes, well, you were making your living at data entry at the time.
I was doing the initial processing of passports and citizen applications and birth, deaths and marriages applications. So a lot of just entering details, and you have to stop and take your 5-minute work-pace breaks, and you've got your keep cups of coffee and tea, and just to try and keep yourself going and not fall asleep at your desk. And so the Data Entry Groove, the piece, there's these the stretches and the RSI exercises coming into the piece, and it's
For the musicians.
For the musicians, while the cellist just has this very repetitive line going the whole time.
Yes. So you have a degree in you have 2 degrees, don't you? You have one in
I have a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and International
That's
Relations,
right,
so help me
yes.
God, and I have a Bachelor of Music Honours in Composition.
Yes. So you've moved on from data entry now, haven't you?
I've moved up to administration.
She's moved up to admin. Fabulous. Keep going. You'll be able to keep going. And yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's a challenge to be an artist and to make a living. I think that's interesting. So when you were working on the quartet, and you'd begun work and you had a deadline and you had this commission for this piece for clarinet and violin and
Viola
and cello.
Yeah.
And then you and all of Wellington and other parts of the country as well were interrupted by the Kaikoura earthquake.
Yes.
How did that event find its way into the piece?
So up until then, I was more or less on track with the piece. And then the Kaikoura hurling earthquake happened, and my work building was closed, so it was the National Library where I sometimes compose, so it was the City Library where I compose. All these places where my head is in a good, this is all I can do here is work sort of space. And of course, you're never quite sure after that if you're feeling an aftershock or just the wind or somebody walking past or just a truck on the street. So I had a lot of trouble focusing. So I think within a few days of the earthquake, I got in touch with Bob and said, you know what, I'm having a lot of trouble focusing, and he very kindly agreed that I could have an extension, which sort of got extended again and again and again and again. And in that time, I rewrote the piece. It went from being this fairly light-hearted, 2-movement, dance-inspired piece, like a nice fusion of classical and jazz. It was, I don't know if you know cinematic orchestra, but in a sense is similar to that, just for quartet rather than a larger ensemble. And it was just this nice, like it had some moments of tension, but it was fairly straightforward. And then from there, it just became about reaction to the earthquake. So there's these sort of aftershock sort of tremors going through it. There's, the mood is totally different. There's some elements that came through from the original work, but I ended up redoing pretty much everything that was in my original plan. a strong sort of sense of guilt in a way, just because, in Wellington we sort of grew up with the idea that there's going to be a big one. We know that we live in a city riddled with fault lines. Some of our straightest streets in Wellington are actually, fault lines. And then the Christchurch earthquake happened and it missed us pretty much, and then the Kaikoura earthquake happened and some of our buildings are now closed and getting pulled down, but we're still sort of okay, and now we're still at so when is it us? Is this it? Is this one now? Okay, no, that was just a truck.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's certainly unsettled Wellington,
Yeah.
and perhaps it's still feeling a bit unsettled, and lots of people have moved out of their offices and so on. Yeah. Interesting. Was Nelson affected by the Kaikoura earthquake particularly? Not much, no. So you must be on the other side of the fault. So Gareth, coming back to you, because we're going to hear your piece tonight as well as the quartet, and yours is an octet.
I know, another wildly imaginative name.
So yours is actually called octet and yours is called quartet.
Yeah.
Yes, well, this is all right.
We're not lying.
They're 4, they're 8.
There we are. It's clear. That's fine. It's very clear. There's no argument about that. I wasn't worrying about the
No,
name
but
really,
sometimes I deliberately go for the wacky title.
Yeah,
and
as
sometimes I don't.
And how do you decide? How did you decide this time not
This
to?
one was just so about my excitement of writing for 8 string players, and the fact that those string players are the New Zealand String Quartet, who have basically since I was 25 been helping me write for string instruments. I mean, the first piece I wrote, one of the first pieces I wrote professionally would have been Ofiro, which was for them when I was 25. So that was, can't even remember what year that was, sometime in the early 90s. And they were so wonderfully helpful for me. I'd never had any sort of professional feedback that was really specific. And perhaps we should, try this with that. And I was like, what a wonderful idea.
That was actually called your quartet number 4, though, so you must have written some string quartets before that. Maybe they were
then I realised
pieces.
I didn't like the first 3, so I just...
So that's really the first one. Okay.
Yeah, it is my first one. It is.
Yes.
Well, yes, it's very difficult to know how to number things when you've only done...
Indeed.
Like I've got a piano concerto, but I didn't dare call it Piano Concerto number 1 because the process nearly killed me. I'm not bloody
Might
writing
never
number
be a
2.
second. No, fair enough. So
But then the Goldners, I wrote for them as well, and so
you've
now,
written separately for the Goldners. So now you've put your 2
commission, and I've got all these 8 astonishing string players who, again, are so. And it's funny because you asked Natalie before what her favourite part of the process is, and I know that. That moment of, oh my God, I finally know what this piece is and it's going okay. That is a beautiful moment. But for me, nothing beats rehearsals. I'm just so much about rehearsals. And the performance goes so fast. And you just sit there and you go, oh, is that it? Did that happen? And it's nerve-wracking because everyone hears it at the same time as you. And then you think, oh, don't trip over the stage when you take a bow and all of these things. Rehearsals are just... If you're comfortable with the group you're working with, I mean, if they're a terrifying group, then okay, maybe not so much. But I find that, especially these players, they're so wonderful, and you get to try things, and you get to let them try things. And it's not music when it's ink on a page. It's just ink on a page. It's when these people suddenly, when human beings make sound waves, it's like, now it's music. And then the interaction is music.
So do things sometimes change at that rehearsal stage for you?
Hugely.
Yes, and so this week you've been rehearsing your octet?
They played a section for the first time today. Since I came down, I popped down to Nelson for just a day last Sunday, just to hear it. And there was a bit that I thought, that's not right. Got to fix that. So there was material that they just played. Oh no, yesterday. I mean, yesterday was the first time that they played that new material, and I would be sitting in the concert going, oh, I wish I'd changed that. So it's such a luxury to have that ability to change stuff. And when the performer's like, yeah, sure, give it to us on the day, we'll be fine.
And that's what Haydn liked, didn't he? He had that orchestra that he could
Right.
play with, and so I mean,
Yeah.
composers have often used groups in this way if they're comfortable with the group.
That's right. It's just this unreasonable expectation that a composer should be perfect before leaving their studio. That doesn't happen.
No, I
well,
think
it might happen to some people, but I hate them.
some of you might remember Larry Pruden, who's not with us now, but Larry was famous for chasing people onto the stage with a pencil in his hand and changing things almost in the performance. He did this
Wonderful.
more than once.
Love
So he was composing right up to the very moment that the audience sat down. So that was really extraordinary. Now, you said to me when I said, "Oh, that you're writing a string octet, not a percussion instrument in sight," and you said that's what you think. So tell me about the percussion in this piece.
I had two ideas, and they were sort of seemingly irreconcilable, because one was purely about melody and not really even about harmony, because what I wanted to do at the very beginning of the piece, and I still do, is just, they're not even in octaves, they're in unison. So the violas, Gillian comes in, starts with a viola solo, yay for the underdog.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Irina from the other quartet just very subtly comes in, so they're both playing at the same time. So it's almost imperceptibly different. It's just the sound of two, and then Rolf comes in with a cello sound, which is quite different, but still on exactly the same notes. But the sound just suddenly sort of goes like this, and then it goes back to one viola, and then it sort of... So it was nothing to do with percussion or rhythm or harmony or anything. It was just about timbre, basically. And then my other idea could be straight out of a percussion piece of mine, because it's all of these funny little percussion sounds that string instruments can make, and this is why I love them so much. There's obviously pizzicato, plucking. That's percussion, really. It just happens to have a pitch. And then I have Rolf tapping on the wood of the instrument, which is like a big wooden drum, like the guitar I used to play when I was 6. Julian from the Goldness is tapping it with his the other side of his bow, and then Helena's going squeak, squeak on the other side of the so all of these little percussion sounds. But what I've done is I've just turned them into it's a groove, basically. It's
Nice.
it's a data entry groove.
That was her title.
Yeah. Well, and they couldn't be more different, these ideas, but the fact that they're so different, they actually do kind of work together, because it's about surprises. It's like, oh, didn't expect that to pop up in this piece. And so there's little moments like that all the way through.
And string players spend their whole lives trying to make a really beautiful sound with their bow.
And
then
what do
you
I do?
ask
Make
them
them sound
to
horrible.
and you ask them to make these sounds. How do they react to that?
Apparently, string players don't really even spend much time learning how to do a pizzicato. They kind of figure that out. And, you know, some players, like there are pianists, who, like Michael Houston, famously dislikes playing inside the piano. He just says, look, it's just not my thing. And we respect him for that. He plays on the keys. And some pianists love doing that sort of thing and getting inside and plucking it and putting glasses in and things. And you just have to go with the flow with what. But of course these string players, they're up for anything.
Now these days you're more composer than performer. Earlier in your career, you were both simultaneously, so you had a couple of really high-profile works where you had to actually play in the work when it was presented.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Tell me about those two people in Gareth. There's Gareth, the percussionist, quite sort of extrovert, flamboyant, the person we're seeing today. This is Gareth, the performer, and then the Gareth, the composer, who might be somebody a little different.
Well, it's changed. It's changed over the years. It's not the same situation as it was 15 years ago. I find that as a result, my compositions have changed as well. I found a 10-minute piece incredibly short, because this is a commission for a 10-minute octet, and it was so short. And I just kept having to sort of stop myself going up that street, because it would lead to another 8 minutes of music, which it wasn't being planned for. or paid for. So, you know, it was funny because I used to consider a 10-minute piece quite a massive achievement. But now, I don't know, I don't think I run around with my head on fire so much as I used to when I was 28.
Yes.
Just needing constant adrenaline, constant excitement, constant nervousness. I actually don't like nervousness anymore, whereas I used to sort of thrive on it, that sort of nervous excitement. And I'm sure I was very irritating.
No.
Oh, good.
Only sometimes.
But it is in order to create, like I've just finished a cello concerto, which is 30 minutes.
Yes, which we're going to hear the
Yes,
NZSO
in
and a
May.
French cellist.
Yes, Sebastien Poitot, which is, but to get yourself into a mindset where you can write 30 minutes of music, and for such a big ensemble, and it's a very serious piece too. So you really do have to allow a long time. And I just don't answer the phone when I'm doing things like that because there would be no point. Forget it. You really have to get very internalized. And I used to find that as a performer, I would have to do exactly the opposite. So I couldn't do both on the same day. You know, I'd have to spend 3 weeks being a composer and then 2 weeks being drinking lots of coffee and banging drums a lot.
Yes, and you've got the octet tonight, you've got the cello concerto in a few months' time, and at the end of March you have an opera being a world premiere in Auckland at the Auckland Festival. Tell us about that one.
Well, that is such a profoundly different process because it's almost all collaborative because I'm given the words. I mean, obviously I can work with the librettist, and she's a playwright who hasn't written a libretto before, so it was a really interesting process of me almost having to figure out how to explain to her what makes a good libretto and having to figure it out for myself before imparting that information to her, which was actually quite difficult. I mean, but there's obvious things like don't put the on a long high note.
Yes.
And I had to sing that sort of thing to her, and she'd go, oh, "Okay, that's horrible. I'm not going to do that."
Yes.
But also little things that I hadn't realised that are important, like if you're writing something that's going to be somewhat lyrical, it's best not to end the line with a consonant even, because then you've say it's the word started, you know, and it's and unless that's going to be the musical point of that thing, it's very hard to set that sort of
So
thing.
there's just the sort of technical things that a librettist needs to know. We heard a wonderful libretto today by Fleur Adcock, which was very spare and economical and marvellous for the composer to play with, I guess.
Yeah.
But even so, Gillian said it was hard to respond to that libretto just because it always is.
It is.
But there's some special difficulties in your opera, which is called the bone feeder.
Yeah.
Because you've got some other languages in there.
Yeah, well, so basically the story is inspired by the Chinese community in 1902 in Otago getting together to repatriate the bones of gold miners, Chinese gold miners, to go back to Guangzhou, which is predominantly where they were from, the Guangzhou, Hong Kong area. And they were unmarked graves, so nobody really knew who they were. They'd died in horrible ways, and they'd been horrendously mistreated. The Chinese gold miners were the only ones charged £100 tax on the gold. Nobody else was. Anyway, so this is this interesting story, and the boat was on its way, picked up a few more bones in Wellington and other places, and then it sank. Really tragically sank just north of the Hokianga harbour. So it never got. So these ghosts never got home, and it's a very important part of Chinese tradition is that you have to be returned to your home place, otherwise you just wander forever. So that's what this is about, and it's a modern day story of a Chinese city guy who lives in Auckland coming to find these bones and then realising that in fact this ghost is perfectly happy here. And anyway, I don't want to ruin it for you.
No.
So my ensemble is 12 singers and 7 instrumentalists, and the exciting thing was using Chinese and Western instruments.
I thought it was interesting, the instruments as well, because you did what you did with the gammon and you went off and bought instruments in China,
Right.
which is, you know, seems to be, you must have quite...
I just had a ball. I went to every single music shop in Beijing, Guangzhou and Hong Kong, and I just came back with this mound of bronze cymbals and gongs, and then realised we had to sort of, you know,
Get it
buy
home.
2 more suitcases to add, as well as luggage allowance to get it home.
But yes, you did say that the most challenging thing about this work was the fact that you were set in Cantonese. And
Yeah, and I'm already approaching the project not actually knowing that much about Chinese culture and learning, you know, on the fly, because, you know, as we've, you know, talked about, predominantly my influence and experience is with Indonesian music. And I was fascinated to learn about it and to learn how these instruments work, just even what the ranges of them are, using Chinese zither, Chinese flute and Chinese fiddle. And they're all very, very different from the Western counterparts, so I had to learn a lot there. But yes, of course, then Renee, the librettist, has written some things in Cantonese. Mandarin has 4 tones. You know, when I mean tones, the pitch of the syllable actually changes if it goes up. So it's sa, it means something different from sa, or straight across sa, or ba, or whatever it is. Cantonese has 9 tones. So there's 9 different meanings of exactly the same syllable, and they all have different characters. And so it occurred to me that there's already a melody built into the spoken language. So as a composer, what do I do? What am I supposed to do? Because it's all there, and if I write a melody that is different from those ones, does it all of a sudden mean something different? And the audience going to sit there going, I really have no idea what that woman is singing about. Well, that tends to happen in opera anyway.
Yes.
Even when it's in English. But so I got advice from a Chinese composer friend of mine, Gao Ping, who's a pianist composer who lives in Beijing and has taught in Christchurch for a long time. And he said, you kind of have to do both. And I was like, okay, at least I now know that I do actually have. So what I did was I got a friend of Renee's to record himself speaking, and then I just listened to it again and again and again, and I learnt the pattern of how he would speak. So I had to basically learn to speak Cantonese for this particular song. And then my melody, I just had it do something similar, but not exactly the same as the notes he was speaking. And it took forever, but it was really gratifying when I'd finished, because I was like, yes, I said Cantonese.
Yes, no, it's quite something. So, Natalie, we're going to ask the audience to ask a couple of questions in a moment, but have you explored cultures other than your own in your composing?
Not a great deal in my composing. I went to Africa last year.
Wow.
And there's a piece that I want to write as a result of that. But I need to talk to the African community first and say, look, is it okay if I... Because I'm not African, eh? I can't just sort of... Yeah, it would be impolite, I think, if I just appropriated, their rhythms.
Yes, we've learned quite a bit about cultural appropriation over the last few decades, haven't we?
Yeah.
And in fact, I've just been watching an interesting online discussion about whether it's okay to do Mikado in the traditional way, but we won't go there today. But it's happening very soon in New Zealand. Yes, yes.
So I think if it's a collaboration, then you're fine.
Yes, I think collaboration helps a lot. Obviously.
If you go, I'm perfectly capable of doing this myself, then you're probably not fine.
When I wrote Only to the Highest Mountain and I incorporated karanga, I went to talk to somebody at the local marae and said, look, this is what I'm doing. Is everybody going to hate me? So making sure that we're okay. But I'd like to, this African piece, I hope it happens.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we'll look out for it.
Thanks.
Now, we have almost run out of time, but we've got time for a couple of questions. Liz.
Yes, Gareth, your cello concerto, you obviously know the soloist. Have you worked with him collaboratively already, or will that happen just before the performance?
Well, we're doing it right now, in fact, and he's been phenomenal. He's been just so involved in the process, and I've sent him the concerto bit by bit, you know, he's in Paris, I'm in Wellington, so thank goodness for Skype, because we actually have had a few Skype sessions where and it doesn't sound great, of course, because the quality of the phone line is not wonderful, but I can still see that he's saying, so this one, I need to use my foot to actually play it, so it's not going to work. I'm like, oh, okay, right. And little things like that. And then when he's saying, this is how well this works, I'm like, oh my God, it really does work well. So, and at the moment, we've got probably a couple more weeks before the score and parts have to be into the NZSO. And that's pretty much, well, no, it's not the cut-off point. Cut-off point is when he says it is. If he's happy for me to be Larry Pruden and jump up on stage with a pencil, then I'll probably do that. But it's been very, very collaborative. And it's partially because he's so excited about the project. He's never had a concerto written for him. And I've never written a cello concerto before. So we're both sort of as excited to make it as good as it can be. So he's putting, everything he has into it. And I've told him, don't be embarrassed about feedback, because that's what I want.
Mm. Anybody else like to ask one of our composers anything? No? Yes.
Natalie, what else do you have coming up in the pipeline?
I'm writing a piece for Amani Winds for Chamber Music New Zealand that will be performed in September.
Just tell us the name of the ensemble again.
Sorry, Amani Winds.
The Amani Wind Ensemble. It's part of Chamber Music New Zealand's program this year. Yes, that's great.
Is it large wind ensemble?
They're a quintet.
Quintet, right.
Flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon and French horn.
Right, yeah.
I don't know how it's going to go yet.
That's all right, you've got time.
Yeah,
Yes.
I wrote a quintet for Zephyr, and it was a challenging one, but you can just pinch some of that if you like. You have to let me pinch something of yours, though. It's called collaboration.
Yes, or whatever. Well, it's probably time for you all to go off for your gin and tonics or your wine or whatever before this evening's delights, including these two new works. So thank you very much to our composers for giving up time on this day, and we're really excited about hearing your pieces tonight. Thank you.